Emma kept her head down as the laughter rose around her, each sound sharp enough to cut the air. Lucas lifted his glass with a slow grin that fed on attention, his eyes locking on her like she was something he owned. "Hey, you." "Yeah, the shy one. Play something on the piano and make us laugh." The crowd burst into louder giggles, their voices rolling together like a wave meant to knock her down. Emma froze, her breath caught in her chest, her hands gripping the tray so tightly her knuckles turned white. She tried to step back, but her feet refused to move. A few guests leaned in with smirks, whispering comments they didn't bother hiding. "She looks terrified, probably doesn't even know which end of the piano makes sound." Someone snorted, and another clinked a glass as if the humiliation was part of the entertainment they paid for. Emma's eyes drifted toward the grand piano sitting in the center of the room. It felt like a giant spotlight glowing directly on her, exposing every fear she had tried to bury for years. She hadn't touched a piano in so long that even looking at one made her chest tighten. Lucas waved his hand in a dramatic circle. "Come on, don't be shy, it's just a little fun." More laughter, more eyes. Emma felt her face burn hot with shame, but there was nowhere to hide. The catering company needed this job. She needed this job. One refusal, one sign of attitude, and she was gone. Someone near Lucas nudged him. "Dude, make her do it. This is gold." Lucas smirked wider, enjoying the power. He pointed at the piano, then at her like giving orders to a servant. Emma swallowed hard as silence slowly crept in, the room waiting for her to break. Her voice barely reached her own ears. If that's what you want." A satisfied grin spread across Lucas's face as the crowd leaned in, hungry for the show. The moment stretched cold and heavy as Emma stepped toward the piano, each step feeling like a trap she couldn't escape. A final murmur rippled through the room. "This is gonna be good." The last thing Emma saw before reaching the bench was Lucas's cruel smile sharpening, waiting for her to fall. Emma wiped her hands on her apron as she stood behind the counter of the Palmetto Grill, trying to slow her breathing after another long shift. Her body felt heavy, like the weight of the entire day had settled into her shoulders. She glanced at the cracked screen of her phone, seeing a message from her younger brother. "Got your note? I'll help Grandma with her meds tonight." "Don't worry," Emma exhaled, a small smile touching her lips. She never wanted Michael to carry more than he had to, but he stepped up anyway. That was who he was, and who she had been forced to become. The job didn't pay much, but it kept the lights on. It kept food in the fridge. It kept the bills from piling too high. Every tip mattered. Every shift mattered. Every breath sometimes felt like a quiet race against time. She moved through the kitchen doors, carrying plates, avoiding conversations, doing her best to disappear into the background. People often assumed she liked being quiet, but the truth was different. She stayed silent because it hurt less. It kept questions away. It kept memories buried. Once she had been loud with dreams, almost certain her life would be shaped by music instead of exhaustion. She could still remember the thrill of winning a youth piano competition, the way her father lifted her off the stage and spun her around like she had already conquered the world. For a while she believed him. For a while she thought talent was enough. But life had other plans. Her father's sudden death shattered everything. One moment he was there humming along to her music as she practiced. The next, the house was filled with a silence so deep it swallowed every melody. Her mother's health collapsed under the weight of grief. Medical bills followed, swallowing what little savings they had. Emma dropped out of the conservatory, walked away from the piano, and took the first job she could find. She didn't have the luxury of dreams anymore. She had a family to hold together, and she held them tightly, even if it meant losing herself. Tonight, she needed extra money, so she volunteered for the catering company's high-paying event assignment, the Harrington Estate, a place she had only heard about in news articles and overheard conversations. Billionaires, investors, influencers, the kind of people who treated money like air. She knew she wouldn't fit in, but fitting in wasn't the point. She needed the paycheck. She needed groceries for the week. She needed Michael to have bus fare for school. She needed to refill her grandmother's meds, so she said yes. As she stepped through the mansion doors for the event, she felt the familiar knot tighten in her stomach. The halls buzzed with loud voices and polished pride. She kept her tray steady and her eyes low, reminding herself to stay invisible, stay quiet, stay out of the way. But when she walked past the main hall, something stopped her. A white Steinway grand piano. Perfect, gleaming, waiting. It almost called to her. She didn't touch it. She didn't even get close. But her eyes lingered for a second too long. Long enough for the past to whisper through her chest like an ache she refused to feel. A voice jolted her back. "You like that thing," one of the wealthy guests murmured with a smirk. Emma shook her head quickly and hurried on. But she already felt the old pain rising, the kind she tried to bury under long shifts and quiet nights. She didn't want anyone to see it, especially not people like them. People who never lost anything that couldn't be bought again. She walked faster, but she knew someone had noticed the tiny flicker in her expression, and that someone was Lucas Harrington. Lucas leaned against the marble railing on the second floor, watching the crowd below with a bored expression. Expensive suit, perfect hair, lazy grin. Everything about him screamed confidence, but none of it felt real. It was the kind of confidence built from other people's praise. Investors were here. Influencers were here. People his father wanted him to charm were here. But all he could feel was the pressure to be someone worth looking at, someone worth praising, someone special, a feeling he never truly earned. He caught sight of Emma moving across the room, quiet and unnoticed except for her careful steps. She kept her head down like she didn't want to disturb anyone, like she had no place being around people like him. But then she passed the grand piano, and something unusual happened. Her eyes softened. Just for a moment, a tiny moment. But Lucas saw it, and it bothered him. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way she looked at it, like she had some secret world inside her he wasn't invited to. Or maybe it was because she had something he didn't, something real. One of his friends nudged him. "What's catching your attention now?" Lucas shrugged, but his smirk returned. He couldn't resist attention, couldn't resist the thrill of making people laugh, even if it meant stepping on someone else to do it, especially someone who wouldn't fight back. "Just the staff," he said casually. "Some of them look like they're about to faint." Another friend chuckled. "Probably never been in a place this fancy before." Lucas nodded, letting that idea settle. It made him feel bigger, safer, more in control. The truth he'd never admit was that he feared being ordinary. He feared being average. He feared being forgotten in a room full of people who mattered more than him. When he finally descended the stairs, he moved through the crowd with practiced charm. He laughed loudly, shook hands, threw out compliments he didn't mean. Eyes followed him because he knew how to demand them. But then he spotted Emma again, serving drinks near the piano. She hesitated as she passed it, like an invisible thread pulled her attention toward the keys. And Lucas noticed her hesitation again. It annoyed him. It intrigued him. It made him feel like she had a story he didn't understand, and he hated not understanding. His friends followed his gaze. Looking at her, one teased. "She's scared of the piano or something?" Another snickered. "Probably can't even play 3 notes." Lucas felt the spark of an idea. Dangerous, selfish, and perfect for the crowd he wanted to impress. He smiled slowly, a smile born from insecurity pretending to be confidence. "Maybe we should find out," he said. His friends laughed. One clapped him on the shoulder. "Do it, man. Make her perform. It'll be hilarious." Lucas didn't need more encouragement. Their laughter fueled him. Their approval fed him. He walked forward with a smug swagger, ready to pull someone else into the spotlight so he didn't have to feel the weight of it himself. Emma felt his presence before she heard his voice. Her stomach dropped. She didn't want trouble. She didn't want attention. But she could tell from the grin on Lucas's face that attention was exactly what he wanted from her. And once he decided she was part of his entertainment, she knew escaping him would not be easy. A few nearby guests turned to watch, sensing a scene. Influencers leaned closer. Investors smirked. Their eyes held the same cold curiosity, waiting for a moment they could joke about later, waiting for someone to be embarrassed. Lucas stepped in front of her, blocking her path with a polished smile. "Hey," he said lightly, but there was a sharpness under the word. "I need you to help me with something." Emma tightened her grip on the tray. "Sir, I'm just serving drinks." Lucas chuckled. His friends chuckled with him. "Relax, it's nothing hard. Nothing you can't handle." She already knew where this was going. She could feel it in the way the crowd leaned closer. She could feel it in the silence that suddenly felt heavier than the music. And she could feel it most in Lucas's confident smirk, the kind that said he held all the power and expected her to bend to it. A familiar fear settled in her chest as he gestured carelessly toward the grand piano. "You don't mind entertaining my guests, do you?" he said. His voice sounded light, but the challenge underneath it cut sharp. Emma glanced at the piano again, fighting back the old ache that twisted through her ribs. She hadn't played in years. She didn't know if she still could, but what scared her most wasn't the piano. It was Lucas's smile, a smile hungry for humiliation. A smile that told her she had just become the next target in his game. And everyone around him was ready to watch. Emma steadied the tray in her hands as she moved through the crowd, trying to keep her distance from Lucas. But distance didn't matter anymore. He kept watching her like she was the only piece on a board he wanted to move. His friends hovered around him, loud and eager, feeding his ego with every laugh. He loved it, he needed it, and Emma could feel the pressure building like a storm she had no shelter from. He raised his voice so the nearby guests could hear him. "You know, I've been told I'm great at getting a crowd going." His friends cheered as if he was some kind of performer. Emma passed by with fresh glasses, hoping he wouldn't notice her again. But he reached out and tapped the tray, making the glasses rattle. "Careful," he said with a smirk. "Don't drop anything. We wouldn't want another accident, right?" She hadn't made a single mistake all night, but he said it like she was already guilty. A couple of guests snickered. Emma forced a small nod and walked away. Her heart thumped painfully in her chest. She didn't like people watching her. She didn't like crowds. She didn't like voices aimed at her like arrows. But Lucas thrived on that. He wanted reactions, he wanted control. And she could feel him pulling her closer and closer into a moment she didn't want. As she handed drinks to a group near the balcony, whispers floated around her. "Is that the waitress he keeps messing with?" one muttered. "She looks scared already." Another shrugged. "Probably doesn't belong here." What did he expect? Emma swallowed hard, their words pressed into her skin. She told herself to stay calm, stay professional, finish the shift and leave. But deep down, an old fear twisted inside her. The same fear she carried since the day life ripped her dreams apart. Lucas didn't let up. He strode across the room toward the bar where she was placing empty glasses. "Hey," he called loudly, as if she were a stray dog. Several heads turned. Emma froze. Her breath felt small, shallow. He stepped closer, eyes bright with mischief and arrogance. "Why are you running away every time I talk to you?" She kept her gaze down. "I'm not running. I'm just doing my job." He laughed. His friends laughed with him. "Oh, come on. Don't be boring. There's a whole crowd here dying for something fun." She felt her stomach twist. Fun. Fun. That word always came with danger when people like Lucas used it. Another friend chimed in. "You could at least make the birthday boy happy." Someone else added, "Yeah, lighten up. It's just a piano." Emma's chest tightened. They didn't know. They couldn't know. To them it was harmless. To her it was everything she lost and everything she feared touching again. She stepped back. "Please, I'd rather not." The group reacted instantly. A few gasps, a few mocking smiles. Lucas tilted his head, pretending to be surprised. "You'd rather not," his voice dripped with entertained disbelief. "You do realize you're getting paid to be helpful, right?" Emma felt heat rise to her face. The room didn't look the same anymore. Walls seemed to close in. Eyes were everywhere, watching, judging, waiting. Lucas leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it sting. "What's wrong?" "Scared. Don't want everyone to see you mess up." The guests behind him chuckled. Emma tried to keep her voice steady. "I'm just here to serve, that's all." Lucas straightened, spreading his arms dramatically to the crowd. "Well, tonight you're going to serve us something different." People drifted toward them, sensing a scene. Emma held the tray tighter, wishing she could disappear into the floor. She didn't want attention. She didn't want their stares, but their curiosity grew like fire. An influencer whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "This is going to be hilarious." Another added, "Can she even read music? She looks like she can't." Emma clenched her jaw, but the words felt like needles. Every insult, every snicker made her smaller and smaller. Lucas stepped around her, circling like he was owning the moment. "Come on," he said again. Play something. Any kid can press a few keys. A man in a suit called out, "Do it, we need a good laugh." Another chimed in, "Yeah, what's the worst that could happen?" A wave of laughter followed. Emma felt cornered. There were too many eyes, too many voices, too much shame pressing in on all sides. She tried again. "Please, don't make me—" Lucas cut her off with a mocking laugh. "Make you? I'm not making you do anything. I'm giving you a chance to be part of something fun." He glanced at his friends and they nodded with smirks. "If you can handle it," the crowd reacted. "Ooh, she's scared. This is embarrassing already." Emma's throat tightened. She thought of Michael. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of the bills waiting at home. She couldn't afford to lose this job, and Lucas knew it. He could see it in her eyes. The panic, the helplessness, the way her shoulders curled inward. He thrived on it. He let the silence stretch, enjoying how trapped she felt. He wanted her to break. He wanted her humiliation to entertain everyone. Emma forced a breath, but it shook. She hated this kind of attention. She hated being watched. It reminded her of the day she walked away from the conservatory, surrounded by whispers and pity she never wanted again. She looked at the grand piano across the room, a beautiful monster, a reminder of everything she buried years ago. Her heart raced, her palms sweated. She couldn't tell if she wanted to run or cry. Lucas clapped his hands once, loud enough to jolt her. "Tell you what," he said, "if you really can't play, say so. Right now, in front of everyone." A cruel smile lifted the corners of his mouth. "And we'll all understand." The guests leaned in closer, hungry for her answer. Emma felt her breath break in her chest. She didn't want to say the words. Not here, not like this, not in front of people who would twist it into something ugly. She stayed silent, and her silence only made Lucas bolder. He stepped closer, lowering his voice again. "What's wrong?" Too scared to admit it, Emma swallowed hard. Her voice was barely a whisper. I just don't want to." Lucas's smirk sharpened into something colder. "That's not an answer," the crowd murmured, enjoying the tension. Emma looked around, searching for a way out, but every exit felt blocked by judgment. Lucas leaned in even closer, giving her no space to breathe. "Fine," he said softly. "If you won't admit it, then prove it." He raised his voice suddenly, making the room jump. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "it's time for a little entertainment." Emma's stomach dropped. His friends cheered. Influencers raised their phones. Laughter swelled like a cruel wave. Lucas pointed dramatically at the piano. "Our waitress will now show us a sketch." Emma felt the floor shift beneath her. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. And before she could gather any words, the crowd began to clap, chant, and push her forward with their excitement. She was sinking fast, and Lucas was watching with the satisfaction of someone who believed he had already won. The pressure tightened around her chest, but the moment wasn't finished yet, not even close. Emma took one shaky step back, but the crowd closed in around her, forming a loose circle that felt more like a cage. Phones rose like cold metal eyes. Every camera pointed at her, every whisper aimed at her. Every breath felt loud in her own ears, but the room's noise swallowed her whole. She wanted to fade into the floor, dissolve into the shadows, escape before the moment crushed her. But Lucas stepped forward, blocking her retreat with a bright grin meant for the audience, not for her. "Come on," he said, lifting his hands like a host controlling a show. "Don't be shy. Think of it as a birthday gift." His friends laughed. "Best gift ever," one muttered. "Hope she at least knows how to touch the keys," another added. Emma felt her body lock in place. A cold feeling spread through her, shame mixed with disbelief, tangled with fear that she couldn't swallow down. She tried again to explain, her voice barely forming. "Sir, I really can't." Someone shouted over her, "Just play something simple," more laughter. Someone else added, "Or smash the keys if that's all you can do." Emma flinched. Their words stung deeper than she expected. She felt smaller with each comment, shrinking into herself, wishing she could disappear. She wanted to scream that they didn't know her, that they didn't understand what the piano meant, but the fear held her in place like invisible chains. Lucas walked a slow circle around her, pretending to look thoughtful. "Maybe she's scared of making a fool of herself," he said loudly. "Or maybe she's never even touched a piano before." His friends echoed the mockery. "Probably not. She looks clueless. Watch her run." Emma felt her breath catch. Her hands shook. She could feel the humiliation squeezing the air out of her lungs. One of the investors smirked and raised his drink. "I say give her a chance. Let's see what she can do." An influencer lifted her phone and whispered to her live viewers. "This is crazy. The waitress is about to embarrass herself." Emma heard it. She heard all of it, and each word felt like a crack forming in her chest. She clutched the tray tighter, trying to stop her trembling, but the metal rattled loudly. A wave of laughter followed. Her face burned. Lucas leaned closer, lowering his voice to something only she could hear. "You know you're not getting out of this, right?" Emma's throat tightened. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this." His smug smile didn't move. Too late, he stepped back, threw his arms open again, and raised his voice to the crowd. "All right, everyone, let's help our performer get in the mood." He started clapping. His friends joined in. Others followed, not even knowing what they were clapping for, only that Lucas told them to. The clapping grew louder, stronger, faster, like a countdown aimed right at her. Emma felt pressure crashing against her chest. Her eyes pricked with tears she refused to let fall. She tried to breathe, but each inhale felt like it got stuck halfway. She hated this. She hated the spotlight forced on her. She hated being made into a joke. The piano loomed behind Lucas, its glossy surface reflecting the lights like a stage she never agreed to walk onto. One guest shouted, "Come on, let the girl play." Another added, "We're waiting." More laughter, more pressure, more heat burning through her cheeks. Emma shook her head once, barely noticeable, hoping the movement would free her from this nightmare. But Lucas took that tiny shake as fuel. "She's nervous," he said loudly. "That's adorable." His friends laughed again. Emma's stomach twisted painfully. She felt trapped between humiliation and survival, between fear and the job she desperately needed, between the life she lived and the life she had lost. Her mind raced. Her father's voice echoed somewhere deep in her memory. "Don't let people decide who you are." But the memory felt distant under the noise. Her grandmother's voice followed, soft and tired. "You're stronger than you think, Mija." But strength felt impossible now. Her brother's face flickered in her thoughts. He needed her. They both did. She couldn't afford to get fired. She couldn't afford to walk away. She couldn't afford to make anyone angry. Lucas clapped again, louder this time, and the room fell into an eager hush. "Since she won't admit she can't play," he announced, "let's give her the chance to prove us wrong." The words hit her like a slap. Guests whispered. Smirks spread. Someone called out, "I hope she doesn't break the piano," another added. "She probably doesn't even know where the middle C is." Emma's stomach churned. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the people closest to her could hear it. Her fingers felt numb. Her legs felt weak. She looked at the piano again, and something inside her cracked open. Not a memory, not yet. Just fear, raw, heavy fear. Lucas lifted his chin toward the piano. "Go ahead," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Show us what you can do." He gave a small, mocking bow. "The stage is yours." His friends burst into laughter. The influencers readied their cameras. The investors leaned forward with raised eyebrows. The room waited. Emma didn't move. She couldn't. She felt glued to the ground, like her body refused to walk into humiliation. But staying still felt just as hopeless. Lucas took a slow step toward her and murmured, "If you don't go now, everyone will think you're scared." His tone shifted, colder than before. "And I'll make sure your boss hears all about it." The threat sank deep. Emma exhaled shakily, barely holding herself together. She took one step forward, then another. The room fell into a heavy, breathless silence as she approached the piano. Every footstep felt like a drumbeat. Every stare felt like a blade. She stopped in front of the piano bench, her heart thudding painfully, her hands trembling so hard she had to hide them behind her back. Behind her, Lucas whispered to a friend, just loud enough for her to hear, "This is going to be the funniest thing all night." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, wishing the floor would open beneath her. The humiliation pressed around her like a closing fist. She lowered herself onto the bench, her breath shallow, her pulse racing. The crowd leaned in. One whispered line drifted from somewhere behind her. "She's done for." And as Emma lifted her trembling hands toward the keys, a cold silence swept across the room, sharpening into a cliffhanger she could feel in her bones. Emma's hands hovered above the keys, trembling so hard she almost pulled them back. The polished surface of the piano reflected her pale face. her wide eyes, her fear. She hadn't sat on a bench like this in years, not since the day everything in her life shifted and the music she loved slipped out of her hand. Now the memories pressed at her chest, threatening to crack her wide open in front of the very people who wanted to see her break. Behind her, a whisper floated. "She's frozen." Another voice followed. "She's about to embarrass herself." A quiet chuckle echoed, the kind that stung like a needle. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat, but it didn't move. Her fingers twitched. Her breath felt thin. The room felt smaller than her own fears. Lucas leaned forward, resting his elbows on the edge of a nearby table with a smug grin. "Any day now," he said lightly, "unless you really don't know how." His friends smirked. One whispered, "Bet she hits a wrong note on the first try. If she hits anything at all," another added. Phones hovered in the air, cameras pointed at her, every angle ready to capture her humiliation. Emma forced herself to breathe, just breathe, slow, quiet, barely there. Her eyes darted across the keys, each one a reminder of who she used to be. A girl who played competitions with fire in her heart. A girl her father adored. A girl who believed music was her future. Now she sat here as a grown woman, weighed down by exhaustion and sacrifice, being mocked by people who never lost anything real. Her hands began to lower, then hesitated, then lowered again. But before she could press a key, "Hold up," Lucas said loudly. "Before she starts, let me say something." The crowd tensed with anticipation. He walked forward with theatrical steps, placing a hand on the piano lid. His smirk widened, hungry for the spotlight. "Just so we're all on the same page," he announced. "She's doing this because the real pianist bailed on me. So I guess we're making do with this." A wave of snickers moved through the crowd. Emma's stomach twisted. Her hands shook harder. She wasn't sure if she wanted to scream or run, but she did neither. She sat there, still silent, listening to the laughter she didn't deserve. Lucas tapped the piano lightly. "Don't worry," he added. "Even if you mess up, we'll pretend to clap." His friends burst into laughter. A woman near the back whispered, "This guy is brutal." Someone else murmured, "She shouldn't have been staring at the piano if she didn't want attention." Emma closed her eyes. The voices blurred together. The room faded, and somewhere inside the noise she heard something else. Something small, gentle, familiar. Her father's voice. "Play from your heart, Em. The world can be loud, but your truth is louder." Her breath hitched. Her fingers stopped shaking. She felt something shift in her chest. Pain, yes, but also something brighter. Something she thought she'd buried forever. She opened her eyes. The keys glowed softly under the lights. They looked different now. Less like a threat, more like a doorway, a place she used to belong. Still she hesitated. Fear clung to her, not fear of the piano. Fear of failing after giving up for so long. Fear of letting people see the pieces of her she tried to hide. Fear of being known. A phone hovered closer. Someone whispered, "Hurry up, girl." Someone else muttered, "She's wasting time." Emma flinched. The fear surged again. Then a cruel voice from the corner jabbed, "Maybe she really can't play." The crowd murmured in agreement. Lucas smirked, lifting his chin. "Clock's ticking," he said. "Let's hear something before we all fall asleep." He made a dramatic yawn, earning more laughs. That did it. Something inside Emma snapped. Not in anger, but in defiance. Quiet, steady defiance. The kind that didn't shout. The kind that didn't crumble. The kind that simply refused to break anymore. She placed her fingers on the keys. The room went silent in a heartbeat. Her breath steadied. Her shoulders lowered. Her racing pulse slowed. She felt her father's voice echo one last time. "Play M," and with a soft exhale she pressed a single key. A gentle note drifted through the room, pure and haunting, floating above the hush like fragile light. It rang out clearer than anyone expected. Cleaner than any beginner could manage. It silenced the doubt, carved through the laughter. Cut straight through Lucas's grin, guests blinked. A few leaned in. Someone whispered, "Wait, that sounded good." Another murmured, "That wasn't an accident." Lucas's smirk faltered just a little, just enough. Emma lifted her hands again, letting the last vibration fade into the charged silence. The air thickened around her, every ear tilted toward her, every eye glued to her trembling but determined fingers. Another breath, another decision. This time, she didn't hesitate. Her fingers began to move toward the next notes. the ones she hadn't dared touch in years, the ones that carried every memory she thought she'd lost, the ones that would change everything. And just before she pressed them, she heard Lucas whisper behind her, uneasy for the first time all night. "What was that?" Emma didn't answer. The room didn't move. The silence waited, tense and electric. Then her fingers curled above the keys, ready to fall again, and something in the air shifted like the moment before a storm breaks. Emma let her fingers fall, not with force, but with a soft certainty that felt like breathing after years underwater. The first notes of Clair de Lune drifted into the room, gentle as moonlight, fragile as memory. They floated across the hall in slow waves, wrapping around each stunned face. Conversations died instantly, phones lowered without their owners realizing. The crowd leaned in as one, caught off guard by the sudden beauty blooming from a piano they thought she would butcher. Her hands moved carefully at first, the old muscle memory waking like a sleeping giant. She traced each note as if touching pieces of her past, pieces she'd buried under responsibility and grief. And as she played, her shoulders loosened, her breathing steadied, her hands stopped trembling. The music carried her, held her, pulled her closer to the girl she once was, the girl she thought she lost forever. A whisper broke through the silence. "No way." Another followed, shaky. She's actually good." A woman near the back pressed a hand over her mouth. "That's not good," she whispered. "That's beautiful." Emma didn't hear them. She didn't hear anything except the melody flowing through her like it was part of her blood. Each note struck clean and full, glowing through the air. She poured years of silence and heartbreak into every measure, letting the music speak all the things she never could. A man near the fireplace blinked hard. "She's trained," he said under his breath. "That's not beginner playing." Another corrected him quietly. "That's not just trained, that's gifted." Lucas's smile collapsed for the first time. His eyebrows knit together in disbelief as he moved closer, almost tripping over a chair. What is she doing?" he murmured. His friends exchanged uneasy looks. One elbowed the other. "Dude, she's actually amazing. How is this happening? This wasn't the plan." The panic in their voices grew, but Lucas couldn't look away. His face shifted from confusion to something sharper, a fear he couldn't hide, a fear of being the joke, a fear of realizing he had no idea who he'd just tried to humiliate. Emma's fingers danced with growing confidence, the melody rising and falling like her own heartbeat. The vulnerability in her touch turned into strength, the softness turned into power. She wasn't hiding anymore, she wasn't shrinking. The room belonged to her now, and everyone felt it. A few guests lowered their phones completely, no longer interested in recording humiliation. They were witnessing something pure, something rare, something they hadn't expected from the quiet waitress they mocked minutes ago. One woman whispered, This is unreal." A man added softly, "She's playing like she's lived inside this music." A tremble went through the room, an emotional ripple that no one could ignore. Emma leaned into the next phrase with deeper emotion, the notes swelling, glowing, filling the hall with warmth that cut through the cold arrogance that had owned the night. She felt her father in every rise of the melody. She felt her mother's tired smile. She felt her younger self, practicing late into the night with dreams too big for her small hands. The music wrapped all of it into something beautiful, something powerful, something true. Someone near the front gasped softly when the room brightened with the sound of her crescendo. Another wiped at their eyes without shame. For the first time all evening, the laughter was gone. The arrogance was gone. The noise was gone. All that remained was Emma, her talent glowing through every measure, her truth cutting through every lie spoken about her. Lucas swallowed hard, watching her fingers glide across the keys like they belonged there all along. "She said she couldn't play," he muttered. His friend beside him whispered, "No, she never said that. You wanted her to say it." The words hit Lucas like a slap. His jaw tightened, his face paled. His humiliation began quietly, only in his own chest, but it grew with every perfect note she played. Emma lifted into the next section, her hands moving faster now, lighter, freer. The melody shimmered, echoing off the marble floors, filling the high ceilings, reaching every corner of the hall. It felt like time paused to listen. The influencers who expected a joke instead recorded with trembling hands, whispering to their viewers, "This is unbelievable." One murmured, She's a real musician." Another said, "I feel like I'm watching something magical." A quiet sniff echoed from an older woman near the center. She lifted her napkin to wipe tears from her cheeks. "She's playing with her soul," she whispered. Emma didn't see any of it. She couldn't. The music pulled her inward, deep into a place where pain and hope lived side by side. She poured everything she had locked away into the moment. The sorrow she carried for years, the exhaustion of holding her family together, the longing for the life she lost. It all spilled out through the piano, raw and full. The room trembled with the weight of it. Lucas stood motionless, his hands cold, his chest tight. His friends slowly stepped away from him, as if they didn't want to be associated with the cruelty that had led to this. The spotlight that once made him glow now burned him. His confidence cracked, his smugness dissolved. And all that remained was the truth, that he had tried to humiliate someone who outshined everyone in the room. The music softened again, drifting into the quietest, most delicate notes of the piece. The entire hall leaned forward as if afraid to breathe and ruin the sound. Emma's eyes closed, her fingers moving with the gentleness of someone touching a memory she cherished too much to break. For a moment the world felt still. No laughter, no mockery, no pressure, only truth. Emma reached the final phrase of the piece, her hands steady and sure. She lifted into the last notes, letting them linger with a heartbreaking tenderness that moved through the air like a prayer. The final chord shimmered, holding its breath before dissolving into silence. A silence so heavy it felt sacred. A silence no one dared break. A silence that crowned Emma. Not as a waitress, not as entertainment, but as something far greater. And then the silence snapped, with a single stunned whisper from somewhere behind Lucas. "Oh my God." A tremor passed through the room as that whisper faded. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. The last note of Emma's performance still hung in the air like a fragile thread of light, refusing to die, refusing to give the room back to the people who had mocked her. Then someone exhaled a shaky breath, then another, and then a loud gasp rippled from near the front. A woman pressed a hand to her chest. She couldn't finish. She didn't need to. Her trembling voice carried the truth for everyone. Emma kept her hands on the keys for a moment longer, letting the silence wash over her, grounding herself. Her heartbeat slowed from fear into something steadier, something calm, something real. She lifted her fingers gently, almost afraid that if she moved too fast, the moment would break. But the moment didn't break, the room did. Applause erupted like a wave crashing through the hall. Not polite, not hesitant, not forced. It was explosive, raw, rising from every corner of the room. People stood, people cheered, people clapped with the gratitude of listeners who had just witnessed something rare, something unforgettable. Emma flinched at first, overwhelmed, unsure if she should turn around. The applause felt heavy, too bright, too loud. But slowly she lifted her gaze. The sight made her chest tighten. People who mocked her were now wiping tears. People who expected her to fail now stared at her with awe. Phones were raised again, not for humiliation but for admiration. A man near the front wiped his eyes unapologetically. "She played like she lived every note," he whispered. Lucas stood frozen. His hands were slack at his sides. His face drained of color. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out. He looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. Because they had. Emma had. His friends stared at him with wide eyes, their smugness gone. One whispered, "Dude, you messed up." Another added, "She's better than anyone here." A third stepped away from him slowly, embarrassed to be standing beside the person who tried to humiliate her. Lucas swallowed hard, humiliation swelling across his face. His eyes darted around the room, searching for someone who still found the moment funny, someone who still saw him as the confident leader of the night. But laughter had no place here anymore. Every eye was on Emma. Every heart was with her. Every soul in the room felt the shift, the collapse of arrogance and the rise of truth. Emma stood slowly, her legs shaky, the weight of the moment settling into her bones. She still didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to face the people who had laughed at her, or how to accept the praise from the same mouths that had doubted her. But she didn't have to. The steps came to her. A woman near the front walked toward her, eyes soft with emotion. "That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years," she said. Emma tried to speak, but emotion closed her throat. The woman squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for sharing your gift." More guests gathered around, speaking quietly, respectfully. as if afraid to disturb the fragile strength Emma had poured across the room. One said, "You have a rare gift." Another whispered, "You moved everyone tonight." Someone else added, "You need to be on a stage, not serving drinks." Emma's breath trembled. She had no words, only a swirl of emotions: relief, disbelief, grief, and something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Then a calm, authoritative voice rose above the crowd. "I knew I recognized you." A woman stepped forward, elegant, composed, eyes bright with recognition. Dr. Evelyn Carter, director of the Pacific Arts Foundation, a name Emma remembered from magazines, from scholarships she once dreamed of applying for. The crowd parted for her with respect, giving her a clear path to Emma. Dr. Carter stopped a few feet away and smiled softly. "You were at the West Coast Youth Conservatory, weren't you?" Emma's breath caught. She nodded slowly. Dr. Carter continued, "I remember a little girl who played with heart first, technique second, and still outshone everyone around her. You are that same girl, only stronger." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. She didn't blink them away. Dr. Carter stepped closer. "Your performance tonight wasn't luck." The room fell silent again, this time with reverence. Dr. Carter extended a card, holding it out like an invitation to a new life. "I want you to meet with me. We have a scholarship program, teaching positions, re-entry tracks for gifted musicians who stepped away." She paused, her voice warm but firm. "You belong there." Emma's breath broke into a small, choked sound. Her hand shook as she accepted the card. Behind Dr. Carter, the guests watched in awe. Some whispered, "She's getting an opportunity." Others murmured, "She deserves it." A few looked ashamed, forever doubting her. The influencers lowered their phones, almost guilty. Lucas watched the entire exchange, his face twisting with something deeper than embarrassment. Something like regret, something like reality finally catching him. The moment that should have boosted his status now crushed him instead. The power he had wielded so proudly now slipped through his fingers, and the girl he tried to humiliate had risen higher than he ever expected. Emma looked around the room. She felt every eye on her. But for the first time all night, she didn't shrink. She stood tall. She breathed fully. She felt seen for the truth she carried, not the uniform she wore. The applause rose again, softer this time but filled with deep respect. And as the sound surrounded her, Emma tightened her grip on Dr. Carter's card and took her first step away from the piano. Not a step into humiliation, a step into possibility. Behind her, a whisper fell from Lucas's stunned lips, barely audible but heavy with disbelief. "What have I done?" Emma stepped away from the piano as the applause faded into a softer murmur, like the room was still catching its breath. She pressed Dr. Carter's card against her chest for a moment, grounding herself. Her legs trembled, not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming shift happening inside her. She had walked into this mansion as a waitress. She was walking out as something completely different, something she hadn't allowed herself to be in years. But as she turned from the piano, she saw Lucas standing near the edge of the crowd, shoulders stiff, eyes unfocused, face pale. He looked nothing like the loud, arrogant figure who had humiliated her earlier. He looked small, exposed, like his own mask had cracked open in front of everyone. His friends avoided his gaze. Some stepped away quietly, others stared at him with disappointment. One whispered to another, "He went too far." Another replied, "Yeah," and she outplayed him in every way. Emma paused, unsure whether to walk past him or wait. Her heart thudded with leftover adrenaline. She didn't want another confrontation, but she deserved clarity, closure, something to end the moment properly. Lucas finally noticed her watching him. His lips parted, but no words came out. His eyes flicked downward, then back up, full of guilt he couldn't hide. He stepped toward her slowly, almost hesitantly, like approaching something fragile or dangerous. He wasn't sure which she was anymore. She didn't step back. He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed, tried again. His voice came out softer than she ever expected. I didn't know." Emma's face stayed calm, but her chest tightened. He continued, stumbling over his words. "I didn't know you could play. I didn't know you were." He couldn't finish. His pride had always been his shield, and now it lay shattered at his feet. Emma looked at him, the weight of everything he'd done still resting between them. She didn't want to hurt him, but she also wouldn't make it easy. She breathed slowly. "You didn't have to know," she said quietly. You just had to be decent. The words hit him hard. His shoulders tensed, his gaze dropping to the floor. A small collection of guests nearby murmured in agreement. Someone whispered, "She's right." Lucas nodded weakly. "I'm sorry," he said. The words sounded strange on his tongue, like he wasn't used to saying them, like they were heavier than he expected. "I was trying to impress people. I wasn't thinking." Emma studied him. She didn't hear excuses. She heard insecurity, fear, immaturity, but no lies, and that mattered. "I wasn't trying to embarrass someone who didn't deserve it," he added, "but I did." His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Emma looked down at her hands, still faintly shaking from the performance. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know if forgiveness should come easy. But she also knew that hearing real remorse was something she never expected from him. When she finally met his eyes again, her voice remained steady. "You hurt me." Lucas nodded quickly, almost desperately. "I know, and I'm sorry, truly." More silence passed. Then Emma spoke again. "I don't need anything from you. Just don't treat people like that again." His expression softened, almost relieved that she wasn't spiteful. He nodded. "I won't a beat." "I promise." Emma held his gaze for a long moment, searching for sincerity. When she found it, she gave him a small nod and stepped away. Lucas watched her leave like someone seeing the cost of his choices for the first time. The next few days felt unreal. Emma returned home to her grandmother and brother, holding the card Dr. Carter gave her like it was a key to a door she thought had been locked forever. When she told them what happened, Michael's eyes widened with excitement. "Emma, you're going back to music." Emma tried to smile, though the emotion caught in her throat. "Maybe. If I'm good enough." Her grandmother reached out, taking her hand gently. "Mija, you were always good." Emma swallowed hard. For the first time in a long while, she let herself believe it, just a little. She met with Dr. Carter the following week. They spoke for almost an hour about her past, her talent, her family, the years she lost to grief and survival. Dr. Carter listened without judgment. Then she offered Emma a place in the Foundation's teaching program, along with a path back into classical performance. Emma stared at her in disbelief. "Are you sure?" Dr. Carter smiled warmly. "My dear, the world needs musicians like you," Emma said. She started immediately, not with pressure, not with expectations, but with small steps, teaching children at a community arts center, sitting at a piano again without fear, rebuilding her strength, her confidence, her identity. The first time she played alone in the empty music room, tears spilled down her cheeks. But they weren't tears of loss anymore. They were tears of return. Her students adored her. They formed circles around her during lessons, eager to imitate her fingers or repeat her rhythm. Music filled her days. Hope filled her evenings. For once her life didn't feel like survival. It felt like possibility. Lucas didn't disappear, but he didn't try to invade her life either. Instead, he began showing up at the community center, not for her, but for the kids. At first it looked strange, out of place, like he wasn't sure what to do with himself. But he volunteered quietly, respectfully. He organized supplies, funded instruments, cleaned up after classes. He didn't make it a show. He didn't brag. He didn't expect praise. He just helped. The kids adored him too, mostly because he treated them kindly. Without arrogance, without ego, like they mattered. And little by little, people saw a different side of him, a side even he didn't know existed. One afternoon, he approached Emma during cleanup. He held a donation receipt awkwardly, almost shy. "I funded new sheet music for your class," he said. Emma glanced at him, surprised. "You didn't have to." Lucas looked down. "I know." A pause. "I wanted to." Emma nodded slowly. She saw the sincerity, the effort, the change. "Thank you." Their conversations remained short, soft, and unforced. Neither of them rushed anything. Neither of them pretended the past didn't exist. But something new grew between them, a quiet understanding, a shared respect, a slow rebuilding of trust. Meanwhile, the video from the party spread like wildfire across the internet. People praised Emma's talent. People criticized Lucas's cruelty. Headlines popped up. Comments filled with outrage and admiration followed. Lucas read every word. The guilt hit him again and again. But instead of hiding, he let it change him. He let it shape him into someone better. One night at home, Emma opened her phone and saw Lucas trending again. Not for scandal, but for volunteering, for sponsoring music programs, for quietly funding scholarships under different names. She blinked in surprise, then smiled faintly. He was growing too, and somehow they were growing in the same direction. 2 months later, Emma stood in front of her students, watching them prepare their pieces for an upcoming recital. Her heart swelled with pride. She was doing it, really doing it, building a life where music didn't belong to the past. It belonged to her future. But the biggest moment was still coming, a moment she never thought she'd face again, a moment she wasn't sure she was ready for. Her students gathered around her, chattering excitedly. "Miss Emma, are you playing in the recital too? You should. You have to." Emma smiled nervously, heart racing. "We'll see," she said softly. But deep down she already knew the answer. She wasn't just teaching music anymore. She was preparing to step onto a stage again, to perform, to rise, to reclaim everything she thought she lost. And as she turned off the lights in the music room that evening, she felt it. A quiet thrill under her ribs, a promise, a beginning. The next part of the journey was calling. Emma stood backstage at the renovated community hall, the soft murmur of the growing audience drifting through the walls. Her hands trembled slightly, not with fear this time, but with anticipation. The air felt alive, warm, full of new beginnings. Her students practiced their scales in small clusters, whispering excitedly as they tuned their instruments. Their energy calmed her. They believed in her more than she believed in herself some days. She adjusted the folder of sheet music under her arm. Inside it was her original composition, the piece she poured herself into late at night when the world was quiet and her heart had something to say. She had rewritten it so many times, it felt like stitching herself back together one note at a time. Michael peeked into the backstage area and waved. "They're almost done setting up," he whispered. "The hall is packed." Emma smiled nervously. "Packed," he grinned. "Like, standing room packed. Everyone is here, Em." She breathed slowly, pressing a hand to her heart. "Okay," she said. "Okay." Rosa followed behind him, leaning lightly on her cane. Her eyes softened with pride when they landed on Emma. "Meedja," she said gently. "You look just like your father when he used to watch you play." Emma's breath caught. Rosa took her hand. "He would be proud, we all are." Emma blinked to fight back the sting of emotion. "I hope so," she whispered. Rosa squeezed her hand. "You don't need hope, you have truth." A knock at the backstage door interrupted them. One of the music center volunteers peeked inside. "Emma," he said, "there's someone here to see you before the recital starts." Emma frowned. "Who?" The volunteer stepped aside. Lucas stood behind him. He looked different, not in appearance but in presence, softer around the edges, grounded. Less like someone trying to impress the world, and more like someone finally learning who he was without the noise. He held a bouquet of simple white flowers, nothing flashy, nothing meant to show off, just genuine. Emma froze for a moment. He smiled nervously. "Hi," he said. It was quiet, almost shy. She stepped closer. "You came," he nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." Michael raised his eyebrows playfully at Emma, then gently nudged Rosa toward the hallway. "We'll give you a minute," he whispered. They slipped out, leaving the two of them alone. Lucas cleared his throat. "I got these for you," he said, holding out the flowers. "They reminded me of your playing, soft but strong." Emma accepted them, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you," he exhaled, like her voice eased something in him. "I've been wanting to say something." For a while she waited. "I didn't know how to face you after everything," he said quietly. "But I needed to. Because I'm not the same person who embarrassed you that night. I don't ever want to be him again." His voice wavered with sincerity that surprised even him. "You changed me. Not because you wanted to, but because you showed me what real strength looks like." Emma's heart softened, but she stayed grounded. "You changed because you chose to," she said. "Not because of me." He nodded. "Maybe. But you were the reason I started choosing better." Silence stretched gently between them before Emma spoke again. "I've seen the work you've done at the center, the donations, the volunteering." His cheeks flushed slightly. "It felt right," he murmured. "And if you'll let me, I want to keep helping." Emma studied him. He wasn't trying to earn praise. He wasn't trying to fix the past. He was simply trying to do good. It was enough. More than enough. "I'd like that," she said softly. His shoulders relaxed, relief washing over him. A voice called from down the hall. 5 minutes until showtime. Emma turned toward the curtain, her heartbeat quickening. Lucas noticed the nerves flickering across her face. "You're going to be incredible," he whispered. "You already are." She took a breath and smiled. "Stay for the performance?" He blinked at her like she had asked the most obvious question. "I'm not going anywhere." The house lights dimmed. The audience quieted. The small stage filled with Emma's students first. Wide-eyed, excited, nervous in the best way. Emma guided them gently, whispered encouragements, fixed a bow here, adjusted a seat there. She watched each child play with pride swelling in her chest. They played with innocence and joy, their small hands carrying the notes she taught them. When the last student finished, the audience erupted into applause. Emma stepped forward, thanking them, smiling at her class, pride glowing in her eyes. Then she took a deep breath. "And now," she said softly, "I'd like to share something of my own." She sat at the piano, her piano. The hall fell silent. Her fingers touched the keys, no trembling, no hesitation. She took a long breath in, the kind of breath she didn't know she had in her years of struggle. Then she began to play. The first notes of her original piece floated outward, tender and emotional, weaving a story of loss and healing. The music rose and fell like a memory learning to breathe again. The melody carried her father's love, her mother's strength, her brother's support, her grandmother's wisdom. It carried the ache of the years she lost and the hope of the future she was building. People listened with hearts wide open. Some closed their eyes, some wept quiet, some leaned forward, transfixed. Rosa cried openly. Michael sat tall with pride. Lucas placed a hand over his mouth, overwhelmed by the beauty she carried so effortlessly. Emma poured every part of herself into the piece, every scar, every triumph, every step that brought her back to this moment. And when she reached the final chord, she let them ring out like a promise. The applause that followed surged through the hall like a rising tide, loud, honest, full. Emma stood slowly, breath-shaking. She wasn't the girl who lost everything anymore. She wasn't the waitress people mocked. She wasn't the shadow of her past. She was Emma Reyes, composer, teacher, musician, survivor, someone who rose from humiliation into brilliance, someone who rebuilt her world note by note, someone who created a life impossible to silence. And as she looked out over the cheering crowd, her family, her students, Dr. Carter, Lucas, her heart whispered the truth she finally believed. This wasn't the dream she lost. This was the dream she made. Emma stepped forward, letting the applause fade into a gentle hum that warmed the entire hall. Her breath steadied, her heart easing into a rhythm that felt new and familiar all at once. She looked at her students lined proudly beside her, their bright eyes shining with the belief she had helped them discover. She looked at her grandmother and brother in the front row, their smiles trembling with emotion. She looked at Dr. Carter, who offered her a small nod of pride, and then her gaze found Lucas. Quiet, humbled, changed, and something inside her settled peacefully. For the first time in years, she wasn't standing in the ruins of her old life. She was standing in the foundation of a new one, a stronger one, a chosen one. As she addressed the crowd, her voice carried the calm strength of someone who had walked through darkness and found her own light. She spoke softly, but every word reached the very back of the room. She spoke about fear, about loss, about the weight of giving up dreams to hold a family together. She spoke about humiliation, and how easily people forget that those who work in silence often carry the deepest stories. She didn't blame or accuse. She didn't preach or demand. She simply shared the truth she had learned, that no matter how deeply someone tries to bury their worth, it never disappears. It waits patiently, quietly, for a moment of courage. Her words moved through the hall like the final notes of her song, gentle, honest, unforgettable. People leaned in, some wiped tears, some nodded slowly, as if seeing pieces of their own stories reflected in hers. Emma ended with the lesson that rebuilt her life, that rising after humiliation is not about revenge. It is about remembering who you are when others try to tell you otherwise. It is about walking forward even when your legs shake. It is about choosing truth over fear and integrity over pride. And when she finally stepped back from the piano, the applause didn't surge this time. It rose like a soft wave, steady, warm, full of respect. Emma Reyes didn't return to the dream she lost. She created one stronger, one brighter, one impossible to silence.